In the beginning, there was nothing but an empty, endless void. It was a place of utter silence, where time itself seemed to hold its breath. Out of this void, something began to stir, an ancient force that had always existed, yet had never been known. This was chaos, the first of all things, a swirling mass of potential waiting to burst into life. Chaos was not just emptiness, it was the raw material from which everything would spring. There was no light, no darkness, just the constant churn of chaos, holding within it all that would ever be. From chaos came Gaia, the earth itself. She was the first to form, solid and enduring, a force of life and stability. Gaia was not just the ground beneath our feet, she was the very essence of life, nurturing, warm, and full of promise. She was the foundation upon which everything else would stand, the mother of all that would come after. As Gaia took shape, she brought with her a sense of calm, a quiet strength that would be the backbone of all creation. She looked out across the empty expanse, her heart full of potential, knowing that from her, life would bloom. But Gaia was not alone for long. From her arose Uranus, the sky, vast and unending. He stretched out over Gaia, covering her with his starry cloak, a protective shield that would keep her safe. Uranus was powerful and strong, a fitting partner for the earth below. Together, Gaia and Uranus formed the first union of the universe, the earth and sky locked in a delicate balance. Their bond was one of both love and struggle, for as much as they needed each other, there was also tension between them. The sky was heavy, pressing down on the earth, and the earth pushed back, striving to grow and expand. From this union of earth and sky, life began to emerge. Gaia, ever the nurturing mother, gave birth to the Titans, the first generation of gods. They were powerful beings, each one embodying different aspects of the world. There was Oceanus, the god of the endless seas, whose waves crashed against the shores with relentless force. Hyperion, the god of light, whose bright rays brought day to the world. And Cronus, the youngest and most cunning of them all, whose ambition would soon shake the very foundations of the world. The Titans were mighty and proud, ruling over the earth with a strength that seemed unbreakable. They built great palaces on the highest peaks, overlooking the vast expanse of their mother, Gaia. Under their reign, the world was a place of raw power, untamed and wild. The rivers flowed freely, the forests grew tall, and the mountains stood firm. But there was a darkness beneath the surface, a growing unrest that could not be ignored. Uranus, who had once loved Gaia, grew distant and cold. He looked upon his children, the Titans, with fear and jealousy. He saw in them the potential to surpass him, to take his place as the ruler of the sky. And so, in his fear, he turned against them, imprisoning them deep within the earth, in the very womb of Gaia. The weight of Uranus pressed down upon Gaia, and she could feel the suffering of her children, trapped and powerless beneath her surface. Gaia, heartbroken and angry, could not bear to see her children suffer. She called out to them, her voice filled with sorrow and rage. "Who among you will rise up and end this tyranny?" she asked, her voice echoing through the dark caverns where the Titans were imprisoned. But the Titans were afraid, for Uranus was strong, and his wrath was terrible. Only one among them had the courage to answer his mother's call. Cronus, the youngest and most cunning of the Titans, stepped forward. His heart burned with anger at the injustice done to him and his siblings, and he vowed to put an end to Uranus's reign. Gaia, filled with a mixture of hope and fear, gave Cronus a sickle made of the hardest stone, a weapon that could cut through anything, even the sky itself. Cronus waited for the right moment, and when Uranus came down to lie with Gaia, he struck. With a swift and brutal motion, Cronus castrated his father, ending his reign of terror in an instant. The blood of Uranus fell upon the earth, and from it sprang new life, giants, furies, and other beings of great power. The sky, once heavy and oppressive, was now light and free, and the earth breathed a sigh of relief. But Cronus, though he had freed his siblings and claimed the throne, was not a kind ruler. He feared that one day, his own children would rise up against him, just as he had done to Uranus. So, when his wife Rhea gave birth to their first child, Cronus did the unthinkable. He swallowed the infant whole, ensuring that no one could ever challenge his power. One by one, Rhea bore him children, and one by one, Cronus devoured them, each time hoping to quench the fears that gnawed at him. Rhea, desperate to save her children, came up with a plan. When she gave birth to her sixth child, Zeus, she hid him away in a cave on the island of Crete. In his place, she gave Cronus a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, which he swallowed without a second thought. Zeus, meanwhile, grew strong and wise, nurtured in secret by nymphs and fed on the milk of a divine goat. When Zeus was grown, he returned to challenge his father. With the help of Metis, the goddess of wisdom, he tricked Cronus into drinking a potion that made him vomit up his other children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Together, they joined forces against Cronus and the Titans, waging a war that shook the heavens. The battle was fierce, but in the end, Zeus and his siblings triumphed. The Titans were cast down, imprisoned in the depths of Tartarus, a place so dark and far from the light that they would never threaten the world again. With the Titans defeated, Zeus and his siblings took their place as the new rulers of the universe, the Olympian gods who would reign over the earth and sky. But the scars of the past remained. The earth still trembled with the memory of the Titans' rage, and the sky still held the echoes of Uranus's fall. The gods who now ruled were powerful, but they were not all-knowing or all-loving. They carried with them the legacy of their fathers and mothers, a legacy of love, fear, betrayal, and power. And so, the world continued to turn, under the watchful eyes of the gods, who, like the mortals they ruled, were bound by fate and the endless cycle of time. In the heart of Mount Olympus, a sacred fire burned brightly, casting long shadows across the grand hall where the 12 Olympians gathered. These gods, each with their own power and purpose, ruled over the heavens, the earth, and everything in between. They were not distant, untouchable beings, but fierce and passionate, their emotions as wild and untamed as the forces they controlled. They loved deeply, hated fiercely, and every action they took rippled through the lives of mortals below, shaping destinies in ways both kind and cruel. At the center of it all stood Zeus, the king of gods. His presence was commanding, his eyes filled with a storm's intensity. In one hand, he held a scepter of pure gold, and in the other, the thunderbolt, a weapon so powerful that the mere thought of it made even the bravest tremble. Zeus was the sky, the rain, and the thunder. He was the protector of justice, but his wrath could be swift and devastating. Those who defied him found themselves at the mercy of his fury, a force of nature that could not be tamed. Yet, behind the thunder and lightning, there was a heart that loved his family and his people, even as he struggled with the weight of the crown that rested upon his brow. Beside him stood Hera, the queen of the heavens. Regal and fierce, she was the embodiment of marriage and family. Hera's love was as powerful as her anger, and woe to anyone who threatened what she held dear. She was not just Zeus's wife, but a goddess in her own right, one who commanded respect and admiration. Yet, beneath her dignified exterior, there was a heart that had been wounded many times. Zeus's betrayals cut deep, and though her anger often lashed out at those around her, it was born from a place of deep hurt and longing for a love that was pure and unwavering. Hera's strength lay in her endurance, her ability to stand tall even when the world around her seemed to be crumbling. In the depths of the ocean, far from the halls of Olympus, Poseidon ruled with a trident in hand. The sea was his domain, vast and unpredictable, just like the god who commanded it. Poseidon's mood shifted like the tides, calm and serene one moment, and a raging tempest the next. His voice could summon waves that would drown cities, or gentle currents that would cradle ships to safety. Poseidon was a god of power, but also of deep loneliness. The ocean was a vast, empty place, and though he was surrounded by countless sea creatures, Poseidon longed for the companionship that the land above seemed to promise. His heart ached for connection, for a place to belong, even as he embraced the solitude of his watery kingdom. Demeter, the goddess of harvest, brought life to the world with every step she took. Her touch made the fields burst with grain, the orchards heavy with fruit, and the gardens bloom with color. She was the earth's nurturer, the one who ensured that life continued, season after season. But there was a deep sadness within Demeter, a longing that never truly left her. Her daughter, Persephone, had been taken from her, stolen away to the underworld. Though Persephone returned each spring, the pain of their separation never fully healed. Demeter's joy at her daughter's return was tempered by the knowledge that they would soon part again. Her love for Persephone was as endless as the cycles of nature she governed, a love that brought life to the world but left her own heart forever yearning. In the midst of war and wisdom, Athena stood, a warrior with the mind of a strategist and the heart of a protector. Born from Zeus's head, fully grown and armored, Athena was the embodiment of reason and justice. Her gray eyes saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be, full of potential and promise. Athena fought not for the thrill of battle, but to defend the helpless, to bring order to chaos. Her wisdom was her weapon, sharper than any blade, and her courage was unshakable. Yet, even in her strength, there was a quiet sadness, a burden that came with the knowledge she carried. Athena was a goddess who understood the cost of war, the price of wisdom, and the loneliness that often accompanied leadership. Apollo, the god of the sun and music, was a figure of light and joy. His golden lyre brought music to the heavens, his voice a melody that could soothe even the most troubled soul. He was the god of prophecy, seeing the future with a clarity that was both a gift and a curse. Apollo's light touched everything, bringing warmth and life, but also casting shadows. For all his brightness, there was a melancholy in Apollo, a loneliness that came from knowing too much, seeing too far ahead. He loved fiercely, but his love was often unreturned, his heart broken by the very beauty he cherished. Apollo's music was his solace, a way to pour out the emotions he could not otherwise express, a way to connect with the world that he felt so distant from. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, was the goddess of the hunt, wild and free. She roamed the forests with her bow and arrows, her heart beating in time with the rhythm of the wilderness. Artemis was a protector of women and children, a guardian of the natural world. She valued her independence above all, her heart belonging not to any man but to the moon and the stars. Artemis was fierce and untamed, but there was a gentleness to her, a deep love for the creatures she watched over. Her solitude was her choice, a reflection of her desire to remain unbound, yet there was a longing within her for something more, a connection that she denied herself in her pursuit of freedom. Ares, the god of war, was a figure of raw, untamed power. His presence on the battlefield was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, a force of destruction that few could stand against. Ares reveled in the chaos of war, the clash of swords, the roar of battle. Yet, beneath his fierce exterior, there was a deep loneliness, a yearning for the peace he could never find. Ares was a god who knew only conflict, and though he was worshipped for his strength, he was also feared and shunned. His heart ached for acceptance, for a place where he could lay down his arms and find peace, but such a place seemed forever out of reach. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was a vision of perfection. Her mere presence could stir the hearts of gods and mortals alike, her beauty unmatched in all the world. But Aphrodite's power went beyond her physical appearance. She could inspire love, passion, and desire with a single glance. Yet, for all her gifts, Aphrodite knew the pain of love as well as its joys. She had seen the hearts she had touched break and bleed, had felt the sting of betrayal and the bitterness of unrequited love. Her heart was as fragile as it was powerful, and though she was the goddess of love, she was not immune to the sorrows that love could bring. Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge, was a figure of strength and resilience. Born with a lame foot, he was cast out by his own mother, Hera, yet he rose from the ashes to become the greatest of all craftsmen. Hephaestus's hands could shape metal into anything he desired, his forge a place of creation and innovation. But for all his skill, Hephaestus carried a deep sadness within him, a loneliness that came from being different, from being rejected by those who should have loved him. His heart ached for acceptance, for the warmth of a family that had cast him aside, and though he found solace in his work, the scars of his past never fully healed. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, was a figure of speed and cunning. With his winged sandals, he could travel anywhere in an instant, his mind as quick as his feet. Hermes was the god of travelers, of thieves, of anyone who needed a quick wit and a silver tongue to survive. But beneath his playful exterior, Hermes carried a heavy burden. He was the bridge between the gods and mortals, the one who delivered messages that could change lives or end them. His heart was full of compassion, yet he was often misunderstood, seen as a trickster rather than a guide. Hermes' loneliness came from the constant movement, the inability to stay in one place, to form lasting connections. He was always on the move, always searching for something he could never quite find. Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, was a figure of joy and celebration. His presence brought laughter and music, his wine loosening the bonds of sorrow and care. But Dionysus was not just a god of pleasure, he was also a god of madness, of the wild and untamed forces within the human soul. His heart was full of contradictions, of joy and sorrow, of ecstasy and despair. Dionysus knew the pain of being an outsider, of being different, and his revelries were a way to escape that pain, to find a place where he belonged, even if only for a moment. His heart ached for connection, for a place where he could be truly free, but like the wine he poured, that freedom was fleeting, slipping away as quickly as it came. In the beginning, when the world was nothing more than a vast void, darkness reigned supreme. The silence was profound, an emptiness that stretched out in every direction, a place where nothing yet existed. But within this void, there was a stirring, a whisper of something more, something that yearned to be born. From this darkness emerged chaos, the first of all beings, a swirling mass of potential and possibility. Chaos was the seed from which everything else would grow, the spark that would ignite the creation of the world. From chaos, Gaia, the earth, took form. She was solid, nurturing, a place where life could take root and flourish. Gaia was the mother of all, her heart beating with the rhythm of creation itself. As she stretched out into the void, she gave birth to Uranus, the sky, who wrapped himself around her, a protective dome that enclosed the world. Together, Gaia and Uranus brought forth the first beings, the Titans, ancient and powerful, their presence filling the world with energy and life. But even in this early world, there was conflict. Uranus, though he loved Gaia, feared the power of their children. The Titans were strong, their potential vast, and Uranus worried that they would one day overthrow him. In his fear, he imprisoned them deep within Gaia's womb, a place where they could not threaten his rule. Gaia's heart ached with the weight of her imprisoned children, their cries of anguish echoing within her. She could not bear to see them suffer, and so she hatched a plan to free them. From her very essence, Gaia crafted a great sickle and gave it to her youngest son, Cronus. With a heavy heart, Cronus took the sickle and waited for the moment when Uranus would draw near. As Uranus descended to be with Gaia, Cronus struck, his blow severing the bond between the sky and the earth. Uranus's blood fell to the earth, and from it, new life sprang forth, giants, nymphs, and furies, beings of incredible power and fury. Cronus took his father's place as ruler of the world, but the shadow of the prophecy haunted him. It was said that just as he had overthrown his father, so too would his own children rise against him. To prevent this, Cronus swallowed each of his children as they were born, trapping them in the darkness of his own belly. But his wife, Rhea, could not bear to lose all her children. When her youngest, Zeus, was born, she tricked Cronus, giving him a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead of the baby. Zeus was spirited away to a hidden cave where he was raised in secret, growing stronger with each passing day. When Zeus came of age, he confronted his father, forcing Cronus to release his siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Together, they waged war against the Titans in a battle that shook the very foundations of the world. The sky thundered, the earth trembled, and the seas roared as the Olympians and the Titans clashed. In the end, Zeus and his siblings emerged victorious, casting the Titans into the depths of Tartarus, a dark and terrible place from which they could never escape. With the Titans defeated, the Olympians took their place as the new rulers of the world, their reign marking the beginning of a new era. But even as the gods took their thrones, the world was incomplete. There was still something missing, something that would bring life and meaning to the earth. That something was humanity. The task of creating man fell to Prometheus, one of the Titans who had sided with Zeus in the Great War. Prometheus was wise and kind, his heart full of love for the creatures he would create. With care and precision, he shaped man from the clay of the earth, breathing life into his creation. Man was fragile, weak compared to the gods, but Prometheus saw in him a potential for greatness. Prometheus's love for humanity was boundless, and he could not bear to see his creation suffer. The gods had given man life, but they had left him cold and shivering in the dark. Prometheus looked down at the fire that burned in the hearts of the gods, a warmth that was denied to mortals. He knew that fire was the key to humanity's survival, the tool that would allow them to rise above their humble beginnings. And so, in a daring act of defiance, Prometheus stole the fire from the gods and brought it down to the earth, placing it in the hands of man. The gift of fire transformed humanity. With it, they could cook their food, warm their homes, and forge weapons and tools. Fire gave them power, the ability to shape their own destinies. But Prometheus's act did not go unnoticed. Zeus, the king of the gods, was enraged by this defiance. Fire was a divine gift, one that should have remained in the hands of the gods alone. In his fury, Zeus punished Prometheus, chaining him to a rock on a desolate mountain. There, each day, an eagle would come to tear at his flesh, devouring his liver, which would regenerate each night, only to be eaten again the next day. It was a punishment without end, a torment that would last for all eternity. Yet, even as Prometheus suffered, his love for humanity never wavered. He had given them the means to survive, to thrive, and in his sacrifice, he had shown them the true meaning of courage and compassion. Prometheus's gift was more than just fire, it was the spark of hope, the light that would guide humanity through the darkest of times. But Zeus's anger did not end with Prometheus. He sought to punish humanity as well for accepting the gift of fire. To do this, he devised a plan that would bring sorrow and despair to the hearts of men. From the earth, he created a woman, as beautiful as she was dangerous. Her name was Pandora, and in her hands, she carried a box, a gift from the gods that she was forbidden to open. But the gods knew the nature of man, and they knew that curiosity would be Pandora's undoing. Pandora, unable to resist the temptation, opened the box, and from it poured all the evils of the world, disease, hunger, war, and death. These horrors spread across the earth, bringing suffering and pain to all of humanity. But as Pandora slammed the box shut, one last thing remained inside: hope. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was enough to give humanity the strength to endure, to keep going even in the face of overwhelming darkness. The birth of the world, the creation of man, and the release of evil into the world are stories that speak to the heart of what it means to be human. They remind us of the fragility of life, the power of hope, and the sacrifices that have been made for us. In these myths, we see not just the origins of the world, but the origins of ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, and the unbreakable spirit that drives us forward, no matter what challenges we face. In the dead of night, when shadows danced on the walls and the air was thick with an unspoken dread, Perseus crept into the lair of Medusa. Each step he took was heavy with fear, but the weight of his destiny pushed him forward. He knew what awaited him, a monster so terrifying that a single glance could turn a man to stone. Medusa, once a beautiful maiden, had been cursed into a hideous creature with snakes for hair and a gaze that spelled doom. Perseus's heart pounded in his chest as he gripped the sword given to him by the gods. It was no ordinary sword, but one that gleamed with divine power, sharp enough to sever the very thread of fate. With his shield polished to a mirror-like sheen, he advanced, careful not to look directly at the beast. The reflection in his shield guided him closer, and as he neared, the snakes hissed, sensing his presence. Time seemed to stop as Perseus raised his sword. With a swift, precise stroke, he brought it down, severing Medusa's head. The horror was over in an instant, yet the image of her lifeless face burned into his mind. As he held the head, still dripping with the power to petrify, Perseus knew he had done what few could: he had conquered fear itself. The tale of Theseus, too, is one of courage, but it is also a story of cunning and determination. In the dark labyrinth beneath the palace of King Minos, the Minotaur awaited. This creature, half man, half bull, was a symbol of terror, a beast that fed on the flesh of those unlucky enough to be sent into its maze. Theseus, the prince of Athens, volunteered to end the suffering of his people, to face the monster that had claimed so many lives. Armed only with his wits and a ball of thread given to him by Ariadne, the king's daughter, Theseus entered the labyrinth. The maze was a twisted, confusing nightmare, with walls that seemed to shift and move, leading him deeper into the heart of darkness. But Theseus was undeterred. As he ventured further, the sound of the Minotaur's breath grew louder, a menacing growl that echoed through the stone corridors. When he finally came face to face with the beast, there was no room for hesitation. With every ounce of strength, Theseus fought, his sword clashing against the Minotaur's horns. The battle was fierce, but Theseus was relentless. At last, he delivered a fatal blow, and the Minotaur fell. Theseus, weary and bloodied, followed the thread back to the light, knowing that he had not just slain a monster, but had also freed his people from the grip of fear. Heracles, known to the Romans as Hercules, is the embodiment of strength and endurance. His story is one of endless trials, each more difficult than the last. Heracles was driven by a madness inflicted upon him by the goddess Hera, who hated him for being the son of her husband, Zeus, and a mortal woman. In a fit of rage, Heracles committed an unspeakable act, killing his own family. Stricken with grief and guilt, he sought redemption by agreeing to perform 12 labors, tasks so dangerous and impossible that they seemed certain to lead to his death. The first labor took him to the swamps of Nemea, where a lion with impenetrable skin terrorized the land. Heracles, with his bare hands, strangled the beast, its roars echoing until they were silenced forever. The second labor led him to the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with 9 heads, each of which would regrow if severed. Heracles, with the help of his nephew, cauterized each stump as he decapitated the heads, finally defeating the monster. Each labor tested him, from capturing the golden-horned hind of Artemis to stealing the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Heracles' journey was one of pain and suffering, but through each trial, he emerged stronger, his spirit unbroken. The labors were not just a path to redemption but a testament to the indomitable will of a hero who, despite his flaws, could overcome the impossible. Then there was Jason, the leader of the Argonauts, whose quest for the Golden Fleece is a tale of adventure, betrayal, and the pursuit of glory. Jason's journey began with a promise to reclaim his rightful throne. To do so, he had to retrieve the Golden Fleece, a symbol of kingship guarded by a dragon in the distant land of Colchis. Jason gathered a crew of heroes, each with their own skills and strengths, and together they set sail on the Argo. The voyage was fraught with peril. They encountered harpies, half-bird, half-woman creatures that tormented the blind prophet Phineas. Jason, with the help of his crew, drove them away, earning the prophet's guidance. The Argo sailed through clashing rocks that threatened to crush the ship, but Jason's determination saw them through. When they finally reached Colchis, Jason faced his greatest challenge yet. The king of Colchis set him a series of impossible tasks, but with the help of Medea, the king's daughter who had fallen in love with him, Jason succeeded. He harnessed fire-breathing bulls, sowed a field with dragon's teeth, and fought the warriors that sprang from the earth. With the fleece in hand, Jason returned home, but his journey was far from over. The path to glory was steeped in blood and betrayal, as Jason's choices led to tragedy and loss. Yet, his story is one of perseverance, of a hero who, despite the darkness, never stopped striving for what he believed was rightfully his. Finally, there is Odysseus, whose journey home from the Trojan War is the stuff of legend. The Odyssey is a tale of a man who faced unimaginable trials, not for glory, but to return to the ones he loved. Odysseus's journey was long and arduous, filled with temptations and dangers that would have broken a lesser man. He faced the wrath of the gods, the lure of the sirens whose songs could drive a man mad, and the Cyclops, a one-eyed giant who trapped him and his men in a cave. With cunning and resolve, Odysseus outwitted the Cyclops, escaping by hiding under the bellies of sheep. But his journey was far from over. He faced Circe, a sorceress who turned his men into pigs, and navigated the treacherous waters between Scylla, a 6-headed monster, and Charybdis, a deadly whirlpool. Each challenge brought him closer to despair, but Odysseus's love for his wife, Penelope, and his son, Telemachus, drove him forward. Even when he was offered immortality by the nymph Calypso, who held him captive for years, Odysseus refused, longing only to return home. When he finally reached Ithaca, his home was not as he left it. Suitors had overrun his house, vying for Penelope's hand. Disguised as a beggar, Odysseus entered his home, and with the help of his son, he reclaimed his place, slaying the suitors and reuniting with his wife. These tales are not just stories of heroes, but of the human spirit, its strength, its flaws, and its capacity for greatness. They remind us that even in the face of insurmountable odds, there is always a way forward, and that true heroism lies not just in the deeds we do, but in the courage we find within ourselves. In the stillness of the underworld, where shadows whispered secrets of the dead, Orpheus played his lyre. Each note that escaped from his fingers carried the weight of a love that had been torn from him too soon. Eurydice, his beloved, had been snatched away on their wedding day, her life cut short by a venomous snake. Grief-stricken, Orpheus could not accept her fate. His love for her was so strong, so pure, that he defied the natural order and ventured into the realm of the dead. With nothing but his music to guide him, Orpheus stood before Hades and Persephone, the rulers of the underworld. As he played, his sorrowful melody filled the dark halls, softening even the hardest hearts. The dead wept, and for a moment, the underworld itself seemed to sigh with longing. Hades, moved by Orpheus's love and the power of his music, agreed to let Eurydice return to the world of the living, but with one condition. Orpheus must not look back as he led her out of the underworld. If he did, she would be lost to him forever. Hope surged through Orpheus as he took Eurydice's hand, and together they walked toward the light. But doubt gnawed at him with every step. What if she wasn't really behind him? What if this was all a cruel trick? Unable to bear the uncertainty, Orpheus glanced back. In that instant, Eurydice was pulled back into the darkness, her last look one of love and sorrow. Orpheus's heart shattered as he watched her fade away, knowing that he had lost her forever. The tale of Pyramus and Thisbe is a story of love that could not be silenced, not even by death. In a city divided by a bitter feud, Pyramus and Thisbe, two young lovers, were kept apart by their family's hatred. But their love was a flame that no wall could extinguish. They would whisper through a crack in the wall that separated their homes, each word a promise of a future they knew they could never have. Desperate to be together, they planned to meet in secret beneath a mulberry tree outside the city. But fate is a cruel master. As Thisbe waited for Pyramus, a lioness, her jaws bloody from a recent kill, appeared. Terrified, Thisbe fled, leaving behind her veil. When Pyramus arrived, he found the veil stained with blood and the tracks of the lioness. Believing that Thisbe had been killed, Pyramus was consumed by grief. In his despair, he took his sword and plunged it into his heart, the ground beneath the mulberry tree soaking up his blood. When Thisbe returned and saw what had happened, her heart broke. She kissed Pyramus one last time before taking his sword and ending her own life. As their blood mingled beneath the tree, the once white berries turned a deep red, a lasting symbol of their tragic love. The story of Cupid and Psyche is one of love tested by the harshest of trials. Psyche, a mortal woman of extraordinary beauty, was loved by the god of love himself, Cupid. But their love was shrouded in secrecy, for even the gods can be envious. Venus, Cupid's mother, jealous of Psyche's beauty, sent her son to make Psyche fall in love with a monster. But when Cupid saw Psyche, he was struck by her beauty and instead fell deeply in love with her. He took her to his palace, where they lived in bliss, but only on the condition that Psyche never saw his face. Their love grew, but so did Psyche's curiosity. One night, unable to resist, she lit a lamp to gaze upon her lover as he slept. As the light revealed Cupid's divine form, a drop of oil from the lamp fell onto his shoulder, waking him. Heartbroken by her betrayal, Cupid fled, leaving Psyche alone and desolate. Psyche's love for Cupid was too strong to let him go, and she embarked on a journey filled with impossible tasks set by Venus herself. Each task was more difficult than the last, but Psyche's determination never wavered. She was even sent to the underworld to retrieve a box of beauty from Persephone. Through all her trials, Psyche proved her love was true, and in the end, she was reunited with Cupid. The gods, moved by their love, granted Psyche immortality, allowing her to be with Cupid for eternity. Narcissus and Echo's story is one of love that was never returned, a love so deep it consumed everything in its path. Echo, a nymph cursed to only repeat the words of others, fell hopelessly in love with Narcissus, a young man of extraordinary beauty. But Narcissus was cold and indifferent, caring for nothing and no one but his own reflection. Echo followed him through the forests, longing for him to speak so she could at least echo his words, but he only spurned her. Her love for him was so great that it left her wasting away until only her voice remained, a haunting echo in the mountains. Narcissus, meanwhile, found a pool of water so clear that it mirrored his image perfectly. Mesmerized by his own reflection, he fell in love with it, not realizing it was just an image. He stared at it for days, unable to tear himself away, until he too wasted away, leaving behind a flower that still bears his name. The story of Narcissus and Echo is a reminder of the dangers of vanity and unrequited love, a tale as tragic as it is timeless. The tale of Pygmalion and Galatea is a story of love that transcends the boundaries of life itself. Pygmalion was a sculptor who had grown disillusioned with the flaws of mortal women. In his loneliness, he created a statue of a woman so perfect that he fell in love with it. Day after day, he would gaze upon the statue, caressing it as if it were alive, whispering words of love to the cold, lifeless stone. His love was so intense, so pure, that he prayed to Venus, the goddess of love, to bring his creation to life. Moved by his devotion, Venus granted his wish. As Pygmalion kissed the statue, he felt its lips grow warm, the cold stone softening into flesh. The statue came to life as Galatea, and she and Pygmalion were married, their love a testament to the power of faith and the belief that love can breathe life into even the coldest of hearts. These stories of love, though tragic, speak to the deepest parts of the human soul. They show that love is not just a feeling but a force that can drive us to the greatest heights and the deepest depths. Even in their sorrow, these tales remind us that love, in all its forms, is the most powerful emotion of all. In the cold grip of an endless night, Prometheus stood chained to a lonely rock. He had defied the mightiest of gods, Zeus, by gifting fire to mankind, a gift that was never meant for them. Fire, the very essence of warmth, light, and progress, was now in the hands of mortals because Prometheus saw their suffering, their struggle in a world that had given them so little. He could not stand by and watch them shiver in the darkness, helpless and afraid. But this act of compassion came at a terrible cost. Zeus, the king of gods, was furious. He saw the gift of fire as an unforgivable crime, a challenge to his authority that could not go unpunished. Every day, as the sun rose over the barren cliffs, an eagle would descend upon Prometheus, its wings casting a shadow over the tortured Titan. The bird would tear into his flesh, devouring his liver in a grotesque ritual of pain and suffering. Prometheus endured this agony in silence, his body regenerating each night, only for the torment to begin anew with the dawn. Yet, despite his torment, there was no regret in his heart. Prometheus had given humanity the fire that sparked their civilization, and for that, he would suffer 1,000 lifetimes if necessary. His punishment was a testament to the wrath of the gods, a reminder that even an immortal could be brought low for challenging their will. Hera's wrath was a force that left no corner of the earth untouched. Heracles, the son of Zeus and a mortal woman, was the living symbol of Hera's pain, the constant reminder of her husband's infidelity. Her hatred for Heracles was a fire that burned within her, and she sought to make his life a living hell. From the moment he was born, Hera's curse followed him like a shadow, turning every moment of his life into a struggle for survival. Madness was her weapon of choice. She drove Heracles to the brink of insanity, making him believe that his own family were enemies to be slain. In his madness, Heracles did the unthinkable. He murdered his wife and children with his own hands. When the fog of madness lifted, Heracles was left with nothing but the horror of his actions and the weight of his guilt. The gods decreed that his penance would be 12 labors, each more impossible than the last. Yet, even in his suffering, Heracles became a symbol of strength and endurance. He faced monsters, conquered lands, and carried burdens that would crush any other man. But beneath his heroic deeds, there was always the haunting knowledge that his suffering was the result of Hera's unrelenting wrath. Heracles was a hero, but he was also a victim, a pawn in a divine game where the stakes were his very soul. The curse that plagued the house of Atreus was a wound that festered through generations, a dark cloud that hung over one of the most powerful families in Greece. It all began with Tantalus, the king who dared to test the gods by serving them the flesh of his own son. For this abomination, Tantalus was condemned to an eternity of hunger and thirst, standing in a pool of water that would recede whenever he tried to drink, with fruits dangling just out of reach. But the curse did not end with him. It seeped into the blood of his descendants, turning brother against brother, husband against wife, parent against child. Atreus and Thyestes, the sons of Pelops, were the next to fall under the curse's shadow. Atreus, in a twisted act of revenge, served his brother the flesh of Thyestes' own sons at a banquet. The horror of this act set the stage for a cycle of vengeance that would see the family torn apart by betrayal, murder, and madness. Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, led the Greeks to victory in the Trojan War, but his triumph was short-lived. Upon his return, he was murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, in retribution for sacrificing their daughter, Iphigenia, to appease the gods. The curse continued to claim lives, leaving a trail of blood and sorrow in its wake, a reminder of the gods' wrath and the darkness that lies in the hearts of men. The city of Thebes was a place where the gods' anger was felt most acutely, and nowhere was this more evident than in the tragedy of Oedipus. The city was stricken by a plague, a punishment from the gods for a crime hidden in darkness. Oedipus, the king of Thebes, was determined to save his people and uncover the truth, not knowing that the answer he sought would be his own undoing. He had been cursed from birth, abandoned as a child to avoid the prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother. But fate is a cruel mistress, and the prophecy came true despite all efforts to escape it. Oedipus's search for the truth led him to the realization that he was the cause of the plague, that he had unknowingly killed his father, Laius, and married his mother, Jocasta. The horror of this revelation was too much to bear. Jocasta took her own life, and Oedipus, in his despair, blinded himself, unable to face the world he had unwittingly condemned. The plague was a manifestation of the gods' wrath, a punishment for sins that were never meant to be uncovered. The tragedy of Oedipus was a tale of fate, guilt, and the inescapable consequences of the gods' anger. The story of Icarus is a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and the consequences of defying the natural order. Daedalus, a master craftsman, created wings made of feathers and wax so that he and his son, Icarus, could escape from the labyrinth where they were imprisoned. As they soared into the sky, Daedalus warned his son not to fly too close to the sun, but the exhilaration of flight was too much for Icarus to resist. The sun's heat melted the wax that held his wings together, and Icarus plummeted into the sea, his cries for help swallowed by the waves. Icarus's fall was a symbol of the dangers of overreaching, of trying to rise above one's station. It was a reminder that the gods do not look kindly on those who attempt to transcend their mortal limits. The sea where Icarus fell became his grave, a silent witness to the tragic consequences of youthful recklessness and the unyielding wrath of the gods. It all began with a simple choice, one that would echo through the ages and bring an empire to its knees. Paris, a prince of Troy, was asked to judge a contest between three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Each offered him a tempting reward for choosing her as the fairest. But it was Aphrodite's promise that captivated his heart, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. In that moment, Paris sealed his fate and that of countless others. He chose Aphrodite, and with her blessing, he set off to claim his prize. Helen was not just beautiful, she was mesmerizing. Her very presence could stop time, and men would fight and die for just a glimpse of her. But Helen was already married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta. Paris's arrival in Sparta, disguised as a diplomatic visit, was nothing more than a pretext to steal her away. The night he took Helen, slipping away into the darkness, marked the beginning of a war that would last a decade and cost countless lives. The rage of Menelaus, the betrayal of trust, and the violation of sacred bonds turned what might have been a personal vendetta into a conflict that engulfed nations. The siege of Troy was a living nightmare. For 10 long years, the Greek armies surrounded the city, their frustration growing with each passing day. The walls of Troy, said to be built by the gods themselves, stood tall and unyielding, a symbol of the city's defiance. Inside, the people of Troy held on to hope, praying that their gods would protect them. But outside, the Greeks were relentless, driven by pride, anger, and the desire for revenge. Battles were fought in the shadow of those walls, heroes fell, and yet, the city remained standing. It was a stalemate, a deadly dance of death and destruction with no end in sight. Among the Greek forces stood Achilles, a warrior unmatched in skill and bravery. His mere presence on the battlefield struck fear into the hearts of his enemies. Achilles was a force of nature, unstoppable, invincible, except for a single flaw. His mother, the sea nymph Thetis, had dipped him in the river Styx to make him immortal, but she held him by the heel, leaving that one spot vulnerable. It was a small weakness, a minor imperfection, but one that would prove fatal. Achilles' wrath was legendary, especially after the death of his dear friend Patroclus. Consumed by grief and anger, Achilles returned to the battlefield with a fury that even the gods could not contain. He slaughtered Trojan warriors by the dozen, his rage a storm that nothing could quell. But in the end, it was Paris, the very man who started the war, who would bring him down. An arrow, guided by the hand of the god Apollo, struck Achilles in his heel, the one place where he could be harmed. The greatest hero of the Greeks fell, leaving behind a legacy of glory and tragedy. The fall of Troy came not through brute force, but through cunning and deceit. After years of fruitless fighting, the Greeks devised a plan that would change the course of history. They built a giant wooden horse, hollow on the inside, and filled it with their best warriors. Then, they pretended to abandon the siege, leaving the horse as an offering to the gods. The Trojans, believing they had finally won, brought the horse inside their city as a trophy of their victory. That night, as the city slept, the Greek soldiers emerged from the horse and opened the gates to their comrades, who had secretly returned. The city was taken by surprise, and the Greeks unleashed their fury on Troy. Fires raged, blood flowed, and the city that had once stood as a symbol of power and resilience was reduced to ruins. The sound of weeping echoed through the streets as the proud city fell, its people either killed or taken as slaves. The aftermath of the war was a time of sorrow and despair. The fate of the Trojan survivors was bleak. Queen Hecuba, once a symbol of royal dignity, was dragged away in chains, her children slaughtered before her eyes. The great Hector, Troy's bravest warrior, had been killed and dishonored by Achilles long before the city fell. Andromache, his widow, was taken as a slave, her son Astyanax thrown from the city walls to prevent him from growing up to avenge his father. Aeneas, one of the few Trojan leaders to escape, fled with the remnants of his people, carrying with him the hope of a new beginning. He would eventually found a new city far from the ashes of Troy, but the memory of what was lost would haunt him forever. Troy was no more, but its story would live on, a tale of love and betrayal, of bravery and deceit, of gods and mortals intertwined in a tragic dance of fate. The Trojan War was not just a conflict, it was a lesson in the power of desire and the consequences of hubris. It showed the world that even the mightiest cities could fall, that even the greatest heroes could be brought low, and that the wrath of the gods was a force to be feared. The war left a scar on the land, a reminder of the price of pride and the fragility of peace. In the shadowy depths, far from the light of the living world, lies a realm where the sun never shines and the air is thick with sorrow. This is the domain of Hades, the god of the underworld, a place where souls find their eternal rest, or torment. Hades is no tyrant, but his rule is absolute. He presides over the dead with a cold, unyielding gaze, his heart untouched by the pleas of those who cross his threshold. Once a soul enters his kingdom, there is no return, only the silence of the grave and the weight of eternity. The river Styx winds its way through this land, its dark waters a boundary between life and death. It is said that the Styx is more than just a river, it is a vow, a promise that binds even the gods. To swear by the Styx is to bind oneself with an oath that cannot be broken without dire consequences. But for the souls of the dead, it is a final passage, a journey from which there is no turning back. At the river's edge stands Charon, the ferryman, his hollow eyes fixed on the endless procession of souls. He asks for his payment, a single coin placed in the mouth of the deceased. Without it, a soul is left to wander the banks of the Styx, lost and forgotten, forever trapped between worlds. In the underworld, fate is more than a concept, it is a tangible force, spun by the hands of the fates. These ancient, mysterious beings control the thread of life, weaving, measuring, and cutting it as they see fit. Even the gods are powerless against them, for what they decide is final. Clotho spins the thread, Lachesis measures it, and Atropos cuts it, ending a life in a single snip. Destiny, in their hands, is inescapable. For the dead, there is no bargaining, no pleading for a second chance. Their fate has been sealed, and now they must face whatever awaits them in the afterlife. The afterlife in Greek mythology is not a single destination but a landscape divided by the deeds and nature of the souls that arrive. Elysium is a place of peace and eternal bliss, reserved for heroes and those favored by the gods. Here, the fields are green, the sun is warm, and the joys of life are magnified in an everlasting paradise. Souls in Elysium live on in happiness, their burdens lifted, their struggles forgotten. It is a reward for a life well lived, a final rest for those who have earned it. But not all souls find themselves in Elysium. For many, the Asphodel Meadows is their final destination, a vast, gray expanse where the ordinary dead reside. It is neither a place of joy nor torment, but a monotonous existence, a shadow of the life they once knew. Here, the souls drift aimlessly, their memories faded, their identities blurred. It is a place of forgetfulness, where the echoes of the past linger faintly, but with no power to stir the heart. The Asphodel Meadows is a reflection of a life lived in mediocrity, neither good nor evil, a quiet, eternal sleep. Then there is Tartarus, a pit of darkness deeper than the underworld itself, where the wicked and the cursed suffer their eternal punishment. It is a place of despair, where the cries of the damned are swallowed by the abyss. Those who find themselves here are not just dead, they are condemned. Their crimes in life have followed them into death, and in Tartarus there is no escape from the agonies they now endure. The fire burns, but does not consume, the chains bind but never break, and the torment is unending. Tartarus is more than just a prison, it is a reflection of the darkest parts of the soul, where the sins of the past are played out in an endless loop of suffering. Among the tormented souls in Tartarus is Sisyphus, a man whose cunning and deceit in life led him to a punishment that has become a symbol of futility. Sisyphus, once a king, had dared to cheat death itself, tricking the gods and escaping his fate. But the gods are not so easily deceived, and for his hubris, Sisyphus was condemned to an eternal task. He must push a massive boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down each time he nears the top. The boulder crushes his hope every time, yet he must start again, his punishment a never-ending cycle of effort and despair. Sisyphus's torment is not just physical but psychological, a reflection of the endless struggle against a fate that cannot be changed, a burden that cannot be lifted. The underworld is a place of paradoxes, where life is forgotten, yet memory lingers, where punishment is eternal, yet the soul cannot die. Hades rules this land with a stern hand, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. The dead must have their place, just as the living do, and in the underworld, each soul receives what it has earned. Whether it is the peace of Elysium, the quiet of the Asphodel Meadows, or the torment of Tartarus, the afterlife in Greek mythology is a reflection of life's choices, a mirror held up to the soul that shows its true face. In the ancient world of gods and mortals, where power was often measured by might and valor, there existed a force that moved subtly yet powerfully through the threads of fate, women. Whether divine or mortal, women in Greek mythology held a unique and often heartbreaking role. Their influence could shape destinies, their suffering could bring down empires, and their strength could defy even the gods. Goddesses like Athena and Hera were more than just figures of worship, they were embodiments of wisdom, war, and the very fabric of family and society. Athena, born fully armored from Zeus's forehead, was not just a goddess of wisdom, but also a fierce warrior, leading heroes like Odysseus to victory with her cunning and strategic mind. Her heart was forged in the fires of battle, yet tempered with the wisdom of ages. She was a protector of cities, a guide to those who sought her counsel, and a force of justice in a world often ruled by chaos. Her presence in the lives of mortals was a beacon of hope, a reminder that intellect and reason could triumph over brute strength. Hera, the queen of the heavens, was the embodiment of marriage and family, yet her life was a tapestry of pain and betrayal. Married to Zeus, the king of the gods, Hera's love was often repaid with infidelity. Her heart, once tender and full of devotion, hardened with each betrayal. Yet, she remained powerful, her wrath a force to be feared. When her husband's lovers bore children, Hera's jealousy turned to vengeance, and those who crossed her path knew the fury of a goddess scorned. But beneath her anger was a deep sorrow, a longing for the love and loyalty she once believed in. Hera's story is one of strength and endurance, of a woman who stood her ground in a world where even the gods could be unfaithful. In the mortal world, women's lives were often marked by tragedy and suffering. Figures like Cassandra and Helen were caught in the web of fate, their lives controlled by forces beyond their understanding. Cassandra, blessed with the gift of prophecy by Apollo, was cursed to never be believed. Her visions of the fall of Troy, of death and destruction, fell on deaf ears. Her heart ached with the knowledge she carried, the burden of seeing the future yet being powerless to change it. She was a woman trapped by her own gift, her voice drowned out by the disbelief of those around her. Helen of Troy, whose beauty was said to be unmatched, became the face that launched 1,000 ships. Yet, her life was one of sorrow and regret. Taken from her home, her heart torn between love and duty, Helen became a pawn in a war that claimed the lives of countless men. Her beauty, once a blessing, became a curse that brought destruction to all who loved her. She was a symbol of desire and destruction, of a love that could never be free from the shadows of war. The Amazons, the warrior women of myth, were a testament to the strength and independence that women could hold in a world dominated by men. They lived on the edge of the known world, a society of women who chose to live by the sword rather than submit to the rule of men. Their hearts were fierce, their loyalty to each other unbreakable. They fought not for power or glory, but for their freedom, for the right to live as they chose. In a world where women were often seen as weak or subservient, the Amazons stood as a powerful reminder that strength knows no gender. They were warriors who lived and died by their own rules, their names etched in the legends of Greece as symbols of courage and defiance. Among these stories of power and tragedy, the Oracle of Delphi stood as a beacon of divine wisdom. The Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, was the voice of the gods, her words shaping the destinies of men and nations. People traveled from all corners of the earth to seek her counsel, to hear the cryptic messages she delivered in a trance. Her power was not in her own strength, but in her connection to the divine, her ability to see beyond the veil of the present into the mysteries of the future. Yet, the role of the Pythia was not without its burdens. She was both revered and feared, her life dedicated to a service that left little room for personal freedom or joy. The Pythia was a vessel for the gods, a conduit through which the divine will was made known, but in her heart, she was still a woman, bearing the weight of the world on her shoulders. Then there was Medea, a sorceress whose story is one of love turned to rage. Medea fell in love with Jason, helping him secure the golden fleece with her magic and cunning. But when Jason betrayed her, casting her aside for another, Medea's love turned to a fury that knew no bounds. In her rage, she committed acts so terrible that they echoed through the ages. Her revenge was not just against Jason, but against the very world that had wronged her. Medea's story is one of passion and pain, of a woman whose love was so deep that when it was betrayed, it shattered her soul. Her actions, driven by the darkest corners of the human heart, remind us of the destructive power of love scorned. In the tapestry of Greek mythology, women were not merely background figures, they were central to the stories that shaped the ancient world. Their lives were filled with love and loss, power and pain, and their stories continue to resonate, reminding us of the strength and resilience that women have always possessed. These tales, filled with both the divine and the human, capture the essence of what it means to be a woman in a world that is often harsh and unforgiving. There's something about Greek mythology that stirs the soul, something timeless that reaches out from the pages of ancient texts and whispers to our hearts even today. The tales of gods and heroes, of love and vengeance, of the mortal and the divine, have seeped into the very fabric of our culture, leaving an indelible mark on our art, literature, and collective imagination. These stories, born from the minds of ancient poets and storytellers, continue to resonate, echoing through the ages and reminding us of the truths they carry. In the great works of Western literature, the influence of Greek mythology is undeniable. The tragic fall of Oedipus, the trials of Odysseus, the wrath of Achilles, these stories have been woven into the narratives of countless writers who followed. Shakespeare, with his tales of star-crossed lovers and doomed heroes, found inspiration in the myths of ancient Greece. Milton's Paradise Lost, with its grand themes of rebellion and redemption, echoes the epic struggles of the gods and titans. Even in modern literature, the shadow of these myths looms large. Authors like James Joyce and T.S. Eliot infused their works with references to the Greek pantheon, drawing upon the rich symbolism and archetypes that these myths provide. In the world of art, the gods and goddesses of Greece have been immortalized in marble and canvas, their forms capturing the beauty, power, and tragedy of their stories. The Renaissance, that great revival of classical knowledge, saw a resurgence of interest in these ancient tales. Artists like Michelangelo and Botticelli brought the myths to life with breathtaking detail, their works pulsing with the drama and emotion of the original stories. The Birth of Venus, with its depiction of the goddess rising from the sea, is more than just a painting, it's a homage to the enduring allure of Greek mythology. But the legacy of Greek mythology isn't confined to the past. In modern culture, these ancient stories continue to captivate, finding new expressions in books, films, and even video games. The gods have been reimagined in countless ways, from the gritty realism of modern novels to the epic grandeur of blockbuster movies. The story of Perseus slaying Medusa, or of the tragic love between Orpheus and Eurydice, is just as compelling on the big screen as it was around the fires of ancient Greece. These myths have been retold, reshaped, and reinterpreted, but the essence of the stories remains unchanged, a testament to their power to speak to the human experience. What is it about these stories that keeps them alive, even in a world so different from the one in which they were born? Perhaps it's the lessons they offer, the truths they reveal about life, love, and the human condition. The Greeks, in their myths, explored the full spectrum of human emotions: love, hate, jealousy, ambition, fear, and hope. Their gods were not distant, infallible beings, but rather reflections of humanity itself, with all its flaws and virtues. The stories of their triumphs and failings are lessons in humility, in the dangers of hubris, and in the importance of wisdom and justice. Consider the tale of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun despite his father's warnings. His fall is a reminder of the perils of overreaching, of the fine line between ambition and recklessness. Or the story of Pandora, whose curiosity unleashed all the evils of the world, yet left hope as humanity's one remaining solace. These myths are more than just stories, they are moral compasses, guiding us through the complexities of life with the wisdom of the ancients. And then there's the fascination, the irresistible pull that these myths exert on us. There's something about the drama, the larger-than-life characters, and the epic struggles that captivates us, that draws us in and doesn't let go. We see ourselves in these stories, in the courage of Perseus, the cunning of Odysseus, the tragic love of Orpheus. We feel the pain of their losses, the joy of their victories, and the weight of their choices. These myths are timeless because they speak to something fundamental within us, something that transcends the boundaries of time and culture. The gods may have retreated to the shadows, their temples long since fallen to ruin, but their stories live on. They live in the pages of our books, in the brushstrokes of our paintings, in the frames of our films. They live in the lessons they teach, in the morals they impart, and in the fascination they continue to inspire. Greek mythology is not just a relic of the past, it is a living, breathing part of our cultural heritage, a legacy that continues to shape the way we see the world and ourselves. And so, as we turn the pages of these ancient tales, we find ourselves not just reading about the past, but connecting with something eternal, something that speaks to the very heart of what it means to be human. The myths of Greece are not just stories, they are reflections of our deepest fears, our highest hopes, and our most enduring dreams. They are a reminder that, no matter how much the world changes, some things remain constant. And in those constants, we find comfort, understanding, and perhaps even a glimpse of the divine.